Hi there. Today I'm excited to talk to you about how to measure almost everything, the ROI of monday.com. First, a little bit about me. My name is Trey. I help with the strategy and operations on the CS side of things at monday.com. Previously, I was a CSM here, and before that worked on the customer experience team. Essentially what that means is I've spent the last few years helping teams from 5 all the way up to Fortune 50 companies get the most out of monday.com. Fun fact about me, I've been working remotely for almost 7 years now. So if you need any work from home tips or just insight into the best pair of sweatpants out there, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help. Now, before we dive into this topic of ROI, I want to ask you a question. What would you do if you had an extra 4 weeks of time? Your first instinct might be to have a little vacation, get away from it all, unplug for a little bit. And that's entirely understandable. But for today's purposes, I want to narrow that scope just a little bit and think about what you could do at work with an extra 4 weeks to get things done. Maybe you could start another side project or tackle that big, hairy challenge that you've always been scared of. What additional impact could you have if you had an extra 4 weeks to get it done? We'll come back to this a little bit later. But for now, we'll start off with why. Why do we look at ROI? Why is it important to even think about the return on investment? And I look around and realize that we are always being asked to do more with less. Every little bit of money or time or effort that we invest in something, hoping that it will help, really draws us back to this question of ROI. Because at the end of the day, we all want to know that what we're planning or doing or did has an impact, that it was worthwhile and can actually make a real difference in the world around us. So how do we go about breaking down this really big concept of impact or return on investment into something more manageable to think about? Well, let's take an example of a marketing team. Now, maybe you're not in marketing, but you share some challenges with this hypothetical marketing team. It might be quite a bit like your team. They've felt a little disjointed as of late. There's some gaps in the information that they need day to day to do their job. And it's leading to an excess amount of time being spent in meetings, and not just spent in meetings, but an excess amount of time in those meetings spent on catching everybody up and getting everybody up to speed. There's a lot of just hours spent throughout the week chasing down accurate or up-to-date information. As the team has grown and their work has become more complex, it leads to a lot of different tools being used, and those tools don't always talk to each other. So for this team in particular, they spend a good bit of their day double entering information into tools, which not only is inefficient, but opens up the door for mistakes to be made. Now, all of this adds together to a situation to where there's not a lot of visibility into what's going on. So new requests come in, feel like they're just kind of being thrown over the wall. There's not a lot of foresight given to what's coming down the pipeline, but it also means that trying to get together an accurate report is a very time-intensive and manual process. By the time it's all checked and compiled, it's already out of date. If this sounds familiar to you, it sounded familiar to a lot of other marketing teams as well. We did a survey earlier this year on marketing teams and the challenges that they face. And things like meeting those timelines for launching campaigns, dealing with incoming requests, managing projects across teams, or even just tracking the status of where everything is at, were all flagged as major challenges. Maybe you're not in marketing, but you have similar challenges to your day-to-day work as well. But what if this team, what if your team actually had all the information that they needed when they needed it? If there was a really high degree of transparency and alignment on the team, what would be the value of knowing the timeline and status of everything going into the meetings, not just coming out of them? Think about how much time could be saved and how much morale could be boosted if there wasn't that issue of entering information into all the different systems, but instead they talked to each other and those workflows were connected. If we didn't spend all of our time trying to fill in those information gaps, but rather could trust that the information was where we needed it, and that enabled us to create real-time dashboards. How valuable would that be for them? Well, ultimately, these are the types of questions that we look to answer when we think about ROI, return on investment, when we try to put some kind of number around the value that's brought to the team. Now, this isn't just one thing or one way of going about it. I like to think of ROI as a spectrum. On the one hand, we have back of a napkin math, these quick, easy calculations that you can do probably in your head to think about the number of hours spent on something times the number of team members that we have, and that's roughly our ROI. On the other end of things, we have something really in-depth and specific to your team, like Forrester's Total Economic Impact report. Now, for most teams, we're going to need something somewhere in the middle, because the back of the napkin math, although it's easy to do, it's hard to trust because it doesn't really feel like it takes into account all of the specifics of our team and their workflow. On the other hand, although the Forrester report is really thorough and in-depth, it takes a lot of time and energy to do all of those interviews and make all of those calculations. So for today, we're going to start somewhere in the middle. And this being monday.com, I created a board. Now, we're going to give you access to this board so you can download it into your account and make the calculations that you like. But you could probably create this board from scratch pretty quickly as well. Let me walk you through what we're looking at here. So on this calculator, what I've done is created an item or a row for every activity that we're going to try to calculate in this ROI equation. I've got a few different columns set up here. The first one is a numbers column where we're tracking the number of team members involved in this activity. For this example, we've got 50 people on the team. Next, I'm taking the number of hours a week that's spent on average across these team members. So in this case, everybody spends about an hour a day or 5 hours a week on email. Next up, we've got the productivity boost column. So this is just another numbers column for us to input the change in productivity from switching over to monday.com. Now here I've put in 50% because it's not uncommon for us to see anywhere from a 20 to 50% reduction in email sent for teams who are heavy users of monday.com. As a matter of fact, internally, we don't use email to communicate. We definitely use it externally with clients, but inside of monday.com, there's really just not a need. Now, the next few columns here are formula columns that are calculated automatically based on those first few inputs there. So the hours per week saved, the hours per year saved, the weeks per year saved are all calculated automatically as formulas. Next up, we've got a column for average salary, and this is another place that you can control the inputs. You can put in what makes sense for your team for the average salary across that group that we're measuring. And then the very last column here is another formula that just calculates that salary and the number of hours that we're saving every year to give us some type of ROI across all, in this case, 50 members of the team. So let's take a look at some of the other activities that we might want to consider. Not just emails, but meetings. These are something that we see even more of since the pandemic has started. The meetings are more frequent, even though they have been a little bit shorter. So now more than ever, we want to understand the impact of those meetings. And it's not uncommon for us to see the number of meetings throughout a week cut by 30 to 40% for teams that are heavy users of monday.com. But I don't want to just think about the amount of time that's saved on meetings by reducing meetings or reducing their time, but also think about how much more productive those meetings are if everybody has all the information that they need going into it, so that the meeting isn't just spent getting caught up on where we are today, but instead starts with a clear picture of where we are and helps move us forward. One thing that we've gotten in the habit of recently that really has helped is just going through in an item on your board and posting what the agenda is for the meeting beforehand, any slides, presentations, information to get everybody up to speed before the meeting starts. And then after the meeting's done, posting the recording there as well, so that regardless of a team member's time zone or availability, they're still able to stay in the loop. Now, something else that we see a lot of teams spending a lot of time on these days is just information gathering, making sure that you have accurate information to do your job day to day. And even though it usually happens in small little kind of increments throughout the day, 30 seconds, a minute here and there, it definitely adds up throughout the week. Whenever we have a place for everything and everything in its place in a system like monday.com, it allows everybody to benefit from reducing those tiny little interactions throughout our day looking for the right information. It's always frustrating to try to spend minutes or sometimes hours just tracking down something that you feel like you should have access to easily, and monday.com really helps with that. Not just because you're able to upload or link to documents, but even things like the updates area, being able to search for that in Search Everything and quickly find those conversations when you need them just in time. Probably the best example that I can give from this personally is times where I've been talking to a client and they're expressing a challenge that they're facing or a need that they have, a pain that they have with the current setup, or maybe even just interest in a new upcoming feature release. And right there on the phone, on the fly, I'm able to search our instance of monday.com and quickly find the latest information. I can see an update from somebody who maybe I've never personally met and is halfway across the world, but was working on that exact piece of the product earlier that day, posted an update, and I'm able to keep the client in the loop. Again, they're in real time because that information is right there at your fingertips. Now, this next item that we have here to consider is a little bit different. You'll notice that instead of all 50 members that we're accounting for here, I just put 5 members in the column. So this following up on status is really just that activity that every team lead and project manager knows all too well, and that's the need to just give those quick little nudges throughout the day and throughout the week to make sure things are going on track and according to plan. Now, a lot of teams spend quite a bit of time on this. I was pretty conservative by just saying 2 hours in the week, but again, you can fit in the number that's right for your team here. What's really interesting is we see this number drop dramatically across teams who are heavy users of monday.com. So we're able to put in a productivity boost of 70%. How are we able to do that? Well, a couple of things go into the logic here. One, when you have information readily available, the team is in there updating the status in real time as they're getting work done, and they're in the habit of that. You don't have to chase people down for status anymore. It's right there on the board. Additionally, you can use the automations feature to create notifications and those little nudges leading up to deadlines to make sure that people are being proactive in updating that status. Now, something that a lot of teams come to us with a major pain point around, especially as you get more than one group of people in the system, is reporting. And this can be a really manual and laborious process day in and day out, especially for managers. So in monday.com, when you create that dashboard that allows you to pull in those key pieces of information and visualize them easily, you can set it up once and then always have that real-time update for where a project or an initiative stands. It not only shaves time off of your calendar every week, but it also allows people to get more accurate and more up-to-date information on where things are at. Not just on desktop or on their laptop, but now even on their mobile device and on the go. This is one of the biggest compounding effects that I see in monday.com, because we're able to set up not just dashboards for an individual group or team, but across several different teams and departments and roll those up as many times as we would like for higher and higher levels of the organization. And then last but definitely not least is that data reentry challenge. We've got so many different tools that all need to be worked in throughout the day. Connecting them with something like integrations saves not only time, but also saves mistakes. So by being able to connect those tools on the back end, it makes it so much more efficient to run, but also so much easier to trust the data that you're looking at. Now, the nice thing, of course, with the board is we're able to look down at the bottom and see what our results are, calculating what the ROI might be for this team in using monday.com. But again, you can put in the numbers here that make sense for you. How many team members, the hours that they're spending on any of these activities, maybe any activities that are unique to your workflow, and what you see that productivity gain being. Now, you might question where we got some of those numbers or how we're able to make some of those assumptions. And it's not just based on my personal experience. It's also based on the clients that we work with. So some of these you'll hear from in the conference this week, but teams like Zippo were able to add 87% more capacity to take on new projects by using monday.com. Genpact was able to improve internal collaboration by 40%. ThoughtWorks was able to cut down emails and meetings by almost half. And this team in particular that was there in our Forrester report, I want to highlight specifically because they went through the process of doing all of the interviews and the calculations and all the work that went into a very detailed ROI analysis. And they came up with some really interesting numbers. But for today, I want to focus on one number in particular, and that's that 3 hours a week saved per each employee. It's because this isn't the first time that I've had that number come up when talking about ROI with clients. As a matter of fact, as a rule of thumb, just roughly, I see that number of 3 hours a week per employee come up pretty regularly. And if we extrapolate that out for an entire year, that lands us back where we started at 4 weeks. So if we take 3 hours a week, spread out across the entire year, we're looking at 4 weeks back on time that's returned to you. So what would you do with an extra 4 weeks in your year? Not just 4 weeks for you personally, but 4 weeks for every single person on the team in terms of time saved. Now, when we think about this and calculate things like ROI, we can't just think about what's saved, but it's that time that's saved to do something more. As a matter of fact, it's that opportunity that that extra 4 weeks opens up that's really exciting, and why we can have a theme today for something like no limits, because there really is no limit on the return. All of the calculations that we've done and the examples that we've given are just a starting place. Yes, they can make you much more efficient, but efficient for what? What new things can you take on? What new innovations can be made? What new improvements could there be had if you had an extra 4 weeks to really get that work done? These are really just a starting point. And we see time and time again as customers use monday.com and expand beyond the initial team and expand past that first year, that there is a compounding effect, even a network effect, where as we add more and more users in, the return that each user gets increases, because now it's not just their team that has transparency, but the other teams that they interact and work with. We're able to break down silos across workspaces, across different geographies and different teams by having all that information in one transparent place. The reporting then becomes much broader and much more valuable to upper levels of management. Even simple things like new use cases for meeting agendas or new employee onboarding can be improved, all with that same initial investment. So as we think about ROI today, I want you to think not just about the things that could be saved, the efficiencies that could be gained, but the opportunities that can be opened up when you have that time back.